The marketplace of Nova Frontier Station wasn't where Kel Rickston had expected to die. After 15 years as a stellar coalition commando, surviving 3 interplanetary conflicts and countless Black Ops missions, he'd always figured his end would come in combat, not while shopping for spare parts for his battered freighter. The commotion erupted at the far end of the bazaar, angry shouts, the crash of overturned stalls, and the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging. Most civilians scattered, but military instincts died hard. Kel moved toward the disturbance, hand resting on the illegal pulse pistol concealed beneath his jacket. That's when he saw her. She was on her knees, surrounded by 5 figures in the unmistakable crimson armor of the Purity Front, radical militants dedicated to cleansing human space of alien influence. Her head was bowed, silver-blue hair cascading forward to partially conceal features that explained everything. Eyes too large, skin with a faint luminescent sheen. Half human, half Eridani. "This abomination walks among us, pretending to be human," the leader's amplified voice echoed through the now-empty marketplace. "The penalty is death." Kel had no personal stake in alien politics. The Eridani Empire had kept to itself for centuries, allowing only limited contact with humanity. But something about the woman's quiet dignity in the face of death stirred something long dormant in him. "Stop," Kel's voice cut through the tension. 5 helmeted heads swiveled toward him. "This isn't your concern, citizen," the leader snarled. "Making it my concern." Kel stepped closer, nodding, the woman's violet eyes widening in surprise. "Last I checked, summary execution isn't legal in Coalition space." "She's not human," the leader raised his weapon. "The Coalition doesn't protect creatures like this." "She looks human enough to me." Kel moved deliberately, positioning himself between the militants and the woman. "How about we let the actual authorities decide?" The leader's laugh was cold. "There are no authorities here. That's why we chose this backwater. Stand aside or join her." Kel felt the woman's hand touch his boot. "Please," she whispered, "don't die for me. They won't stop." Perhaps it was her voice, musical and resonant in a way no human voice could be. Or maybe it was just that Kel Rickston had spent too long following orders, too many years watching innocents die while he followed mission parameters. "My name is Myra," she said softly. "Thank you for your kindness, but please go." The leader's patience ended. "Enough," the weapon hummed as it reached full charge. "Last warning." What happened next occurred in heartbeats. Kel saw the leader's finger tighten on the trigger. With combat-enhanced reflexes, he spun and threw himself over Myra as brilliant blue energy erupted from the weapon. White-hot agony lanced through his back. The smell of charred flesh, his own, filled his nostrils. Darkness crowded the edges of his vision, but not before he saw reinforcements arrive, not station security, but tall figures in crystalline armor that could only be Eridani. "Hold on," Myra's voice seemed to echo inside his mind rather than his ears. "My father's guards are here, just hold on." "Father," Kel tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. The darkness consumed him, and his last thought was oddly peaceful. At least he'd finally chosen when and how to die. Then impossibly light. Kel awoke surrounded by soaring crystal arches that caught and refracted sunlight in patterns no human architecture could achieve. He lay on a bed that conformed perfectly to his body, monitoring tendrils gently withdrawing from his healed skin. A tall figure stepped into view, regal, distinctly alien despite his humanoid form. The luminescence beneath his skin was stronger than Myra's, his eyes entirely violet without whites. "I am Emperor Terk of the Eridani," the figure said in perfect English. "You saved my daughter at great cost to yourself. Name your reward, human, and if it is within my power, it shall be yours." The crystalline spires of Eridani Prime stretched toward twin moons that hung like massive pearls in the lavender sky. From the balcony of his guest quarters, Kel watched flying vehicles that resembled luminous jellyfish poolsing between the towers. 3 days on this world, and Earth already felt like a distant memory. Overwhelmed, Myra's voice came from behind him. Kel turned to find her in the doorway, wearing flowing garments that shifted color with her movements, currently a soft blue that complemented her silver-blue hair. Since his recovery, she'd visited daily, though always with attendants hovering nearby. "Just wondering how I went from space mercenary to imperial guest in less than a week," he admitted. Myra glided forward, her movements possessing an ethereal grace that betrayed her Eridani heritage. "You're more than a guest, Kel. You're a hero to my father. A human who would die for an Eridani is unprecedented." "I didn't know you were a princess when I stepped in," Kel said with a half-smile. "Just saw someone who needed help." "That makes it more remarkable." She joined him at the balcony rail, close enough that he could sense the subtle electric field that all Eridani naturally generated. "And I'm not exactly a princess. Imperial succession is complex." "Because you're half-human." Her violet eyes clouded. "Yes, my mother was a xenobiologist invited to study Eridani biology. Their relationship was forbidden. Cross-species unions are considered blasphemy by traditionalists. When I was born, she smuggled me to human space to protect me." "Until the Purity Front found you," Kel finished. Myra nodded. "An Eridani surveillance unit had been tracking me for years, my father's people, though I didn't know it then. They intervened moments after you." Her voice faltered. "Took a face full of energy weapon." Kel touched the center of his chest where the blast had struck. "Still not sure how I survived that." "Eridani cellular regeneration technology," Myra explained. "Though repairing a human was challenging, the healers said your military augmentations helped. Your nervous system had already adapted to integration with foreign technology." A soft chime interrupted them as the chamber door slid open. Emperor Terk entered, flanked by two advisors whose stern expressions immediately put Kel on alert. "Daughter," the Emperor acknowledged Myra with a gentle touch to her forehead, "I see you're keeping our guest company." "Enlightening him about Eridani politics," she replied. "Then you're undertaking an impossible task," Terk said, with what Kel realized was wry humor. "Kel Rikstan, these are High Counselors Varen and Nax of Houses Solus and Meridian." Both counselors gave minimal bows, their luminescent skin pulsing subtly with what Kel had learned to recognize as displeasure. "Emperor," Counselor Varen began formally, "the Council requests clarification on the human status. His presence in the Imperial Palace violates numerous protocols." "Protocols that I decree," Terk responded, his tone hardening. "He saved the life of my blood at risk of his own. That grants him sanctuary by laws older than your house, Varen." "Of course, Luminance," Varen retreated. "However, rumors spread. 3 houses have already demanded audience to discuss the succession implications." Myra tensed beside Kel. He could almost feel the weight of unspoken politics pressing down on her. "Tell them I will address the full council tomorrow," Terk stated. "Now leave us." After the counselors departed, the Emperor's formal demeanor softened. "I apologize, Kel. You've been thrust into the heart of a crisis centuries in the making." "Your daughter explained some of it," Kel replied. "The traditionalists don't want a half-human heir." "It goes beyond that," Terk said, moving to a control panel. He activated a holographic display showing the Eridani Empire, dozens of star systems connected by shimmering pathways. "For millennia, we isolated ourselves from other species, believing genetic purity was our strength, but we stagnated. Some of us recognized that hybridization might be our salvation, not our downfall." "That's why you allowed my mother to study Eridani biology," Myra said softly. "You planned our relationship." Terk nodded. "I loved your mother genuinely, but yes, there was purpose behind our union. What I didn't anticipate was the strength of opposition. When threats were made against her, against you, I helped her escape, believing it temporary." His voice carried centuries of regret. "I never saw her again." Kel studied the Emperor's face, recognizing the expression of a commander who had sacrificed too much for a cause. "And now that Myra's here, what's your plan?" "I had hoped for reconciliation, for acceptance," Terk said. "Instead, I face rebellion. Half the houses threaten to break away rather than accept Myra in the succession." "And the other half?" Kel asked. "See potential in change," Terk replied, "particularly in stronger ties with humanity. Which brings me to you, Kel Rikstan. Your arrival may be more significant than you realize." Myra's hand found Kel's, her touch sending a strange vibration through his nerves. "The Bond physicians say there's something unusual in how Kel's augmented biology interacted with our healing technology." "Something unprecedented," the Emperor agreed. "Something that might change everything if you're willing to stay and help us, Kel." Kel looked at Myra, whose eyes held both hope and apprehension. He had nowhere to return to, no one waiting for him in human space. and something about her pulled at him in ways he couldn't explain. "I'm listening," he said. The royal gardens floated impossibly, entire islands of vegetation suspended in midair, connected by bridges of light that materialized beneath one's feet when approached. Kel stood at the edge of one such island, looking down at the crystalline city hundreds of meters below. Behind him, Myra knelt beside a strange, bioluminescent plant that responded to her touch by changing colors. "It senses the electrical patterns in your nervous system," she explained, motioning him closer. "Touch it." Kel crouched beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. When his fingers brushed the frond-like appendages, they flickered briefly before settling into a pulsing red. "Red means it perceives you as a threat," Myra said with amusement. "Most non-Eridani get that response." "Smart plant," Kel replied. 3 weeks on Eridani Prime had done little to diminish the targets on their backs. Just yesterday, his morning calisthenics had been interrupted by a servant who'd attempted to add a neurotoxin to his hydration unit. Myra's expression grew serious. "You're still thinking about the assassination attempt." Kel raised an eyebrow. "How did you?" "I felt it," she tapped her temple. "Hear your thoughts, they're becoming clearer to me." "The bond your father mentioned." She nodded, moving closer until they were mere centimeters apart. "It's rare even among pure Eridani, a telepathic connection that develops between compatible minds." "And we're compatible?" Kel asked, acutely aware of her proximity, of the subtle electric field that made the fine hairs on his arms stand on end. "More than should be possible," her voice lowered. "The physicians are fascinated. They believe your neural augmentations are adapting to Eridani physiology, evolving." Kel remembered his military enhancements, synthetic nerve reinforcements, reflex amplifiers, trauma response systems, all designed to make him a more effective soldier. None of them should have allowed telepathic connection with an alien species. "Does it bother you?" she asked, her large eyes searching his. "Having me in your thoughts?" "I've had worse roommates," he said with a half-smile. Then more seriously, "It should bother me, but it doesn't." A chime sounded from Myra's communication band. "The reception is beginning," she sighed. "Father insisted we attend, a show of strength before tomorrow's council session." The grand reception hall pulsed with light and sound, hundreds of Eridani nobles from various houses mingling beneath a ceiling that seemed to open directly into space. Kel felt their stares as he entered beside Myra, some curious, others openly hostile. Emperor Terk greeted them at the center of the hall, his formal attire augmenting his already imposing presence. "My daughter," he said warmly, touching his forehead to hers in the traditional greeting. To Kel, he offered a formal bow. "And her protector." Whispers rippled through the crowd at this public acknowledgement. Kel had learned enough about Eridani culture to recognize the significance. The Emperor was deliberately elevating his status. "House Solus seems displeased," Kel murmured, noticing Councillor Varen and a group of similarly adorned nobles watching darkly from across the hall. "House Solus can go supernova for all I care," Terk replied, his voice low. "You should know, the council vote tomorrow is trending against us. 7 houses now openly oppose Myra's recognition." "What happens if they win?" Kel asked. "Civil war eventually," the Emperor said bluntly. "Without an acknowledged heir, the succession becomes contested. Myra would likely be exiled or worse." Before Kel could respond, the lights dimmed. At the hall's center, performers appeared, manipulating pure energy into complex storytelling patterns. Myra leaned close to explain, "The creation myth, our oldest story." But Kel's attention was diverted by movement in his peripheral vision, 3 figures in ceremonial attire moving with too much purpose toward their position. His combat instincts, honed through years of warfare, screamed danger. Myra gasped beside him, her hand flying to her head. "Kel, there." "I know," he replied, already moving. Somehow, through their bond, he'd felt her recognition of danger the same moment his own instincts had triggered. The first assassin struck with a weapon disguised as a ceremonial staff, a blade of energy arcing toward the Emperor. Kel intercepted it with a precision that surprised even him, his body moving with enhanced speed as he deflected the blade with his reinforced forearm guard. The second and third attackers converged on Myra, but she was no helpless target. Her hands traced patterns in the air, manipulating the ambient energy fields all Eridani could access to some degree. One attacker was thrown backward, while the other's weapon overloaded in a shower of sparks. Guards rushed forward, but not before Kel and Myra had neutralized all three assassins. They stood back to back, his physical prowess and her energy manipulation creating a formidable defense that left the assembled nobility in stunned silence. In the aftermath, as guards removed the would-be assassins, Kel felt Myra's hand slip into his. Without thought, he pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her waist in a protective gesture that was also unmistakably intimate. The whispers redoubled, but Emperor Terk's expression showed not shock but satisfaction. Later, in the privacy of Kel's chambers, Myra paced, while Kel watched from his seated position on a meditation platform. "House Solus will deny involvement," she said, "but everyone knows they orchestrated it." "Your father seemed almost pleased about the attempt," Kel observed. Myra stopped packing. "Because we demonstrated something important tonight, human strength and Eridani energy manipulation working in perfect harmony." She knelt before him, taking his hands. "And our bond, did you feel it? When we fought together, it was like." "We were one person," Kel finished. He could still feel the echo of her consciousness against his own, their thoughts and movements synchronized in a way that transcended normal combat coordination. "This changes everything," she whispered, moving closer until their foreheads touched in the Eridani gesture of intimacy. "If the Council sees what's possible, the evolution we represent." Kel felt the electric charge of her skin against his, a sensation both alien and intoxicating. "And if they don't?" Instead of answering, Myra leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a human gesture she must have learned during her years in exile. The contact sent a shock wave through their growing bond, thoughts and sensations cascading between them in a feedback loop of desire and connection. When they finally parted, breathing heavily, the light beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm with his accelerated heartbeat. "Then we make them see," she said. "A succession challenge has been formally issued." Emperor Terk's voice echoed in the private council chamber where Kel, Myra, and three loyal advisors had gathered before dawn. The atmosphere was heavy with tension, the air itself seeming to vibrate with the Emperor's barely contained anger. "House Solus?" Kel asked, though he already knew the answer. "Along with 4 allied houses," Terk confirmed. "They invoke the ancient right of challenged succession. It hasn't been used in 12 generations." Myra's face had paled, the luminescence beneath her skin dimming. "They're desperate. Last night's failed assassination attempt has made them reckless." "Or strategic," countered Advisor Thurin, the eldest of their allies. "The ancient right doesn't require council approval. It appeals directly to tradition, and many houses still believe in the old ways." Kel had spent enough time studying Eridani culture to understand the implications. "This challenge, it requires combat, doesn't it?" Terk nodded grimly. "Single combat between champions. If their champion wins, I must either renounce Myra as my heir or abdicate in favor of their chosen successor." "And if our champion wins," Kel pressed, "then the challenge is resolved for one full cycle of the Great Moon. No house may contest my decisions regarding succession during that time." The Emperor's violet eyes fixed on Kel. "Which would give us time to formalize Myra's position and begin the integration process we've discussed." The room fell silent as everyone realized what would come next. Myra moved to Kel's side, her hand finding his. "No," she said firmly. "We'll find another champion. The Imperial Guard has warriors trained since birth for combat." "None that can defeat Varen's champion," Terk said softly. "They've selected Krazen the Void Hunter." Even Kel recognized that name. A legendary warrior who had suppressed rebellions on 3 Eridani colony worlds, known for a fighting style so brutal it bordered on sadistic. "With respect, Emperor," Kel said, "I've faced worse odds." His military career had been built on impossible missions, suicide assignments that somehow he'd always survived. One more seemed fitting. "You don't understand," Myra insisted, her grip on his hand tightening. "Krazen isn't just physically formidable. He's a void adept. He can manipulate negative energy fields. He'll turn your own strength against you." "Unless I have help," Kel looked meaningfully at her. "Our bond, we've barely begun to explore what's possible." Terk straightened, understanding dawning on his face. "The ancient rite says nothing about telepathic assistance during combat. It would be unprecedented but not forbidden." Precisely because no one has ever formed a bond like ours, Myra said, hope beginning to replace her fear. Half human, half Eridani, plus your augmentations, Kel, we're something new. The challenge was set for sunset. By tradition, it would take place in the ancestral arena, an ancient amphitheater carved from a single massive crystal, its walls refracting the dying light of Eridani's sun into thousands of dancing prisms. Every noble house had gathered, the tiered seating segregated by allegiance. On one side, the traditionalists led by House Solus, on the other, the progressives who supported Terk's vision for a new Eridani future. Between them, a clear divide, those houses still undecided, waiting to see which way the winds of power would blow. Kel knelt in the preparation chamber beneath the arena, dressed in lightweight combat gear that incorporated elements of both human and Eridani design. The door slid open, and Myra entered alone, dismissing the attendants with a gesture. "The arena is full," she said, kneeling beside him. "Every house is represented." "Good," Kel replied. "Maximum audience for when I embarrass the traditionalists." She smiled despite her worry. "Your confidence is either your greatest strength or a remarkable delusion." "Bit of both," he took her hands in his. "We should strengthen the bond before I go out there." Myra nodded, leaning forward until their foreheads touched in the Eridani gesture of deepest intimacy. Instantly, Kel felt the connection between them surge, his consciousness expanding to include her perceptions, her unique way of sensing the energy fields that permeated all matter. "There's more," she whispered, her breath warm against his lips. "A deeper connection." Kel understood. In the weeks since their bond had begun forming, they had maintained a certain restraint, both physical and mental. Now, with his life at stake, such caution seemed foolish. Their lips met, and with that contact, the final barriers between their minds dissolved. Kel gasped as Myra's consciousness flowed fully into his, not just thoughts and perceptions, but emotions, memories, the very essence of her being merging with his own. He felt her childhood fear and isolation, her years of hiding among humans, the moment she'd first seen him in that marketplace, willing to die for a stranger. In turn, she experienced his memories, the harsh military training, the battles that had scarred both body and soul, the emptiness that had followed his discharge, and the unexpected peace he'd found in her presence. When they finally separated, both were breathing heavily, their skin slick with perspiration that glowed faintly with shared bioluminescence. "Now you understand why I can't lose you," Myra said, her voice breaking. "You're part of me now." Kel brushed a strand of silver-blue hair from her face. "All the more reason I can't lose. We have too much to live for." A resonant tone signaled that the time had come. Above them, the arena floor irised open, the platform beneath Kel beginning to rise. "Remember," Myra said urgently, "Krasin will try to isolate you to break our connection. No matter what happens, keep part of your mind open to me." The platform lifted Kel into the arena to a cacophony of sound, cheers from Terk's supporters, jeers from the opposition. Across the crystalline floor, another platform rose, revealing his opponent. Krasin was massive even by Eridani standards, his skin rippling with enhanced musculature, eyes completely black without iris or pupil. He carried no weapons. His body was weapon enough, and the darkness that seemed to bend light around him spoke of his void-adept abilities. Emperor Terk's voice rang out. "By the ancient right, this challenge will determine the legitimacy of my succession choice. Let combat begin." Krasin moved with shocking speed for his size, covering half the distance between them before Kel could settle into a defensive stance. The first blow came like a meteor strike, a fist wreathed in dark energy that Kel barely deflected, the force still sending him sliding backward. "He's stronger than I expected," Kel thought, knowing Myra would hear through their bond. "Use your agility," came her response. Void adepts struggle with rapid direction changes. Kel dodged the next attack, moving in patterns unpredictable even to himself, letting Myra's instincts guide his movements. He landed a series of strikes to Krasin's torso, each augmented by his military enhancements, but the Void Hunter seemed barely affected. Then came the counterattack. Krasin opened his palms, and pure darkness erupted between them, a gravity well that yanked Kel forward into a devastating knee strike that cracked at least 2 ribs. Pain exploded through Kel's body. "He's trying to break our connection through pain," Myra warned. "Don't let him isolate you." But Krasin was relentless. Another gravity manipulation slammed Kel into the crystal floor with bone-crushing force. Blood filled his mouth as darkness encroached on his vision. Kel, Myra's mental voice seemed distant now. Remember what we discovered. Your augmentations can channel Eridani energy. Through the haze of pain, Kel remembered their experiments, how his neural enhancements had unexpectedly interfaced with Eridani technology. If he could just. Krasin loomed over him, hands preparing for a final, lethal strike of void energy. The age of purity continues, he growled. Your abomination, princess, will never rule. Something snapped inside Kel, not his body, but a limitation in his mind. Through their bond, he reached for Myra's innate ability to manipulate energy fields, channeling it through his own augmented nervous system. Power surged through him, his skin suddenly alight with the same luminescence as hers. When Krasin's strike came, Kel caught it, not deflected but caught. "What is this?" Krasin snarled, trying to pull away. Kel rose to his feet, still gripping Krasin's wrist. "Evolution," he answered, before releasing a surge of combined energy, human determination channeled through Eridani power directly into the Void Hunter's body. Krasin convulsed as light erupted from within him, overwhelmed by a power he couldn't comprehend. When Kel finally released him, the champion of House Solus collapsed, unconscious but alive. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, beginning with the progressive houses and spreading even to some of the undecided factions, a cheer rose that shook the ancient crystal walls. Through their bond, Kel felt Myra's elation mixed with astonishment. "What you just did, it should be impossible." Kel looked up at Emperor Terk, whose expression combined triumph with something like awe. Then his gaze moved to Counselor Varen, whose face had gone ashen with the realization that everything was about to change. That, Kel thought as he raised his still glowing hand in victory, was rather the point. The Imperial Sanctum glowed with ancient light, crystal pillars channeling the energy of Eridani Prime's 3 converging ley lines into the central chamber. For 1,000 years, this sacred space had witnessed the transition of power from one emperor to the next, but never like this. Kel stood beside Myra on the Ascension platform, both dressed in ceremonial attire that blended traditional Eridani designs with subtle human elements. 1 month since his victory in the arena, and still, whispers followed them everywhere of the human who channeled Eridani energy, of the unprecedented bond between species, of the radical future they represented. "Nervous?" Myra asked through their bond, her physical expression remaining serene for the hundreds of noble witnesses gathered below. "Terrified?" Kel replied mentally, his military-trained face betraying nothing. "I was prepared to die for you, not rule an empire with you." Her amusement flowed through their connection. "Consider it an extreme promotion." Emperor Terk approached the center of the platform, resplendent in traditional coronation robes that had been worn by 50 generations of his line. The chamber quieted as he raised his hands. "For 3 millennia, the Eridani have followed the path of isolation and purity," he began, his voice resonating through the crystal architecture. "We believed it was our strength. I stand before you today to proclaim it was our limitation." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Though Counselor Varen and House Solus had formally accepted the combat outcome, their representatives watched with poorly concealed disdain from the far side of the chamber. "The ancient rite has been satisfied," Terk continued. "For 1 full cycle of the Great Moon, my will regarding succession cannot be challenged. And my will is this: I abdicate the stellar throne in favor of shared rule, my daughter, Princess Myra, and her bonded mate, Kel Rikstan." The progressive houses erupted in approval, while the traditionalists remained stonily silent. Terk turned to face Kel and Myra. "The bond ceremony will now commence," he announced. 2 high priests approached, carrying between them an ancient artifact, the Resonance Crown, a circlet of living crystal that would formalize their telepathic bond into something recognized by Eridani law. As tradition dictated, Terk recited the Litany of Union. 2 minds, 2 souls joined as one, 2 bloodlines merged into new strength, 2 paths converging into a single journey. The Resonance Crown was placed upon their joined hands, instantly responding to their unique connection. The crystal illuminated from within, shifting from transparent to a vivid blue-violet that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. "The crown accepts the bond," the lead priest declared with evident surprise. Many had whispered that the ancient artifact would reject a human participant, that the ceremony would fail. It recognizes true compatibility of essence. Kel felt the bond between him and Myra deepen further as the crown's energy enveloped them. Memories flowed freely now, not just their own, but echoes of previous bonded pairs stretching back through Eridani history. Knowledge transferred, wisdom accumulated over generations suddenly accessible. "I have seen the future," Terk said, his voice softening as he addressed the assembly. "Not through prophecy, but through evidence. The strength demonstrated by this union, human adaptability with Eridani energy manipulation, creates something greater than either alone." He gestured toward Kel and Myra. "Their children will inherit the best of both species. Their rule will guide us toward cooperation rather than isolation. This is not the end of Eridani purity, but the next stage of our evolution." Terk removed his imperial circlet and held it above their heads. "Kneel before your new rulers, Empress Myra and Emperor Kel, first of their line, heralds of the Convergence Age." As they knelt, Kel maintained his outward composure while inwardly marveling at the improbability of his journey, from battle-weary mercenary to emperor in little more than 2 months. Through their bond, he felt Myra's equal astonishment, along with her unwavering certainty that this was precisely where they were meant to be. The imperial circlet settled upon their heads, splitting into 2 interlinked crowns in a phenomenon not seen in living memory. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber as the ancient artifact itself transformed to accommodate their dual rule. "Rise and be recognized," Terk commanded. As they stood, the assembled nobles bowed, most out of respect, some out of resignation, all acknowledging the irreversible change to their civilization. 1 year later, Kel stood at the same balcony where he had once contemplated the alienness of Eridani Prime with Myra. Now, the crystalline spires felt like home, the strange plants of the hovering gardens familiar companions. Behind him, in their private chambers, Myra rested on a conforming couch, her hands resting protectively over her swollen abdomen. "The physician confirmed it today," she said, joy radiating through their bond. "Our child carries both lineages in perfect balance, the first true human Eridani hybrid born to the royal line." Kel moved to her side, placing his hand over hers to feel the distinctive dual heartbeat of their developing child. "And the energy signature tests." "Stronger than either of us," Myra confirmed. "The bond physicians believe our child will be able to manipulate energy fields in ways neither humans nor Eridani have achieved independently." The first year of their rule had not been without challenges. 2 minor houses had broken away in protest, though most opposition had gradually evolved into cautious acceptance as the benefits of human Eridani cooperation became apparent. Trade agreements had been established with the Stellar Coalition, scientific exchanges initiated, and cultural barriers lowered. "What are you thinking about?" Myra asked, though she could easily have read his thoughts if she wished. They had learned to maintain privacy within their bond, a necessary skill for 2 rulers with a galaxy of responsibilities. "The day we met," Kel admitted. "How close I came to walking past that marketplace disturbance, how many coincidences aligned to bring us here." "The bond physicians have a theory about that," Myra said, smiling. "They believe true compatibility calls across space and time, that some connections are meant to be, drawing compatible souls together despite all odds." "Sounds suspiciously like destiny for a scientifically advanced civilization," Kel teased. "Perhaps science and destiny are not so different," she replied. "Both follow patterns we're only beginning to understand." A chime announced the arrival of Emperor Emeritus Terk, who had transitioned smoothly into an advisory role while dedicating most of his time to diplomatic missions throughout the galaxy. "The Convergence Council is assembled," he informed them. "Representatives from 3 human colony worlds have arrived to discuss expansion of the joint settlement program." Kel helped Myra to her feet, their bond humming with shared purpose. Together, they had discovered something neither civilization had fully understood before. That strength comes not from isolation but from unity, not from purity but from complementary differences. As they moved toward the council chamber, Kel felt the life force of their unborn child pulsing between them, a new being who would never know the artificial boundaries that had once separated their species. "Ready to change the galaxy again today?" Myra asked through their bond. Kel squeezed her hand, remembering the marketplace where he'd been willing to die for a stranger, never imagining that single decision would transform entire civilizations. With you, he replied, I'm ready for anything. In the great crystalline hall beyond, representatives of two ancient species waited to continue the work of convergence, a future neither could have achieved alone, born from a sacrifice freely given and a bond that defied all expectations.